7 or 8 years ago, when I was working as a consultant in a global consulting firm, we bid on a project in China to assist a conventional bank to open an Islamic banking window. It became very, very clear that in China there was no supporting environment from a regulatory standpoint, or indeed from an intellectual understanding standpoint, about what Islamic finance was. Now, the challenge was really twofold. One was there was no regulatory supporting framework, and nobody who actually understood what that supporting framework would be. And the second thing that became abundantly apparent was that if you are going to open a bank, you need liquidity. You need to be able to take deposits in order to be able to finance or lend money on. And the challenge was that this conventional bank, which was going to be opening an Islamic window, had to be able to use deposits or take deposits which it could lend. But you did not have adequate deposits which were coming from Sharia-compliant sources. So the dilemma that we had was, where's this money going to come from? And of course the bank itself had deposits, but they came from the conventional bank. From an Islamic Sharia-compliant standpoint, they're considered haram. So the dilemma we had was, we'd very much like to open the first Islamic financial institution in China, not only because it's a huge market and a huge country, but there are millions of Muslims in China. But we wouldn't be able to do it because we couldn't access Sharia-compliant liquidity. The choice was going to be to tell the government, well, we can't actually open a bank or open an Islamic finance window because we can't do it in a fully Sharia-compliant way, or we need to change the rules of the game. And changing the rules of the game was not acceptable to the regulators in China because fundamentally they didn't understand it. The solution is we use the concept of in the public interest, Maslaha. What the Sharia scholars understood was, we won't have the first ever Islamic financial institution operating in China if we don't do something about this. There are tens of millions of Muslims who aren't being served with Sharia-compliant products in their financing in China. So we have an option just to shut it down at birth or before it's born, or we need to do something which could facilitate this. And what the Sharia scholars decided, which was permissible, was that for a period of time, 5 years, for example, we could take deposits or we could use money market instruments from the conventional banking sector to fund our Islamic finance. They were very clear that this was not a sustainable solution. In other words, you can't use this as an excuse to continually run the bank on that basis. You need to come up with a strategy that will create an Islamic money market and a funding market and a liquidity market adequate to support the needs of a new financial institution, but that clearly could not happen on day one. So under the concept of Maslaha, in the public interest, the Sharia scholars agreed that we could go down that route, but only for a limited time period. Well, the outcome in China, as far as I'm aware, is threefold. Firstly, that particular bank grew and developed. The second impact on this was that through first mover advantage, many people in China understood more about the benefits of Islamic finance. And as a result of that, the outside world were actually quite taken with the idea that China had taken an initiative here and were very keen to support it so long as China continued growing and developing Islamic finance opportunities. What these Gulf countries did was insist that if they were going to do further trade with China or use Chinese expertise, it was done on a Sharia-compliant basis. So that was a benefit, and China is starting to understand Islamic finance greater. The third area, which will obviously take a long time, is a change in the regulatory environment. The Chinese have not totally changed their regulatory environment, but they've actually, through the efforts that have been made, understood more about what may be required to grow and develop what is an important growth engine, Islamic finance, for both the internal and international economies.